Today, it's my absolutely joy and honor to have Carolyn Anderson and Catherine Roske from America for this interview about co-creation here.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's a joy to be here.
Yeah, it's so wonderful. And Carolyn, I just want to start with you because I had the first connection with you because from the classes I did and the Conscious Evolution Summit I did, of course, Barbara Marx Hubbard was a big inspiration, and you are the co-author of the 52 Codes with Barbara. And maybe you just share with our audience what kind of inspired you and what is dear to your heart that you kind of really dedicated your whole life for this topic of co-creation. And I guess that in the beginning you wouldn't maybe don't call it like that, but then this term came. So yeah.
Yes, well, really, my inspiration was Barbara Marx Hubbard in 1983. My husband Sanford and I, and our husbands will be joining us in the Netherlands for this training we will be offering. So Sanford and I were working with Barbara Marx Hubbard on her campaign for a positive future. And we were working with a team of people. We were living in Palo Alto at the time, near San Francisco. And initially, Barbara was living in Washington, D.C. She had hired a professional staff to run this campaign. And then Sanford and I stepped forward, did a fundraiser for her. And after that, she asked us if we would manage her campaign in California. So that was the initial idea. And what happened was through a beautiful ceremony and a set of synchronicities, a team came together. There were 12 of us, 6 men and 6 women. And at that time, I could not have described what was really going on there, but what happened was through our love for one another and through the diverse capacities of the people on this team, we built this strong resonant field. And so we expanded our intelligence and our consciousness in working together. And we started creating all these documents to run the campaign. We created a value statement, a vision statement, an action plan, a strategy, and all that. And we sent it back through fax to Barbara in Washington, D.C. And, you know, there she was working with this team of professionals who were very old paradigm political operatives. And in the meantime, our team in California, we were spiritually based. We were volunteers. We were not professional at all, but we loved one another and we had a very coherent team. And when Barbara saw all this work that we were producing together, she asked Sanford and me to come back to Washington and to work with the team there. And so we did that, but just for a few days. And then Barbara realized that she needed to move the whole campaign back to California. So she did that. And Sanford stayed in Washington and fired her staff and closed down the office. And it was during that time working with Barbara that these processes started coming through me, these practices. And because both Catherine and I are coded with these practices, they were revealed to me in this resonant field. And then Barbara, in her genius as a social architect, was able to draw the templates, to write down what it was that we were doing. And of course, once you can write it down, you can replicate it. So that's how it began in my life. And then after the campaign, a couple of years later, Barbara and I and 2 others co-founded Global Family. And these practices have become the heart of Global Family. We call it the core group process. And it's all these co-creative practices to shift consciousness and to birth unity, expand unity and love on the planet.
Thank you so much, Carolyn, for giving us a bit of a view into this history. Thank you. And Catherine.
And for myself, it's interesting just the parallel lives that we all, Carolyn was living and Sanford and Makasha and I, without meeting each other for quite some time, but my first experience in meeting Barbara was with Makasha in 1974 when we experienced her SynCon process, synergistic convergence. And that's when I first heard the word co-creation, but there was no definition around it. It was just an idea at that point. And as Carolyn said, being encoded with it, it's like everything, all the various projects and endeavors that Makasha and I have done through the years, through the decades, have been living these practices. But it was really coming together with Carolyn in 1987. We had World Family. She had created Global Family. We merged the two, and then we began working and teaching together in the late 80s. So the practices really came in to form through the inspiration that we all had for creating community. We started Hummingbird Community in 1996 based on the practices of co-creation and conscious evolution. Mm-hmm. And that's where Makasha and I live now in northern New Mexico. And the community's been going for 23 years with these practices at the core.
Mm-hmm. And maybe just in the beginning, I would love to hear your definition of co-creation.
Yeah, that's a great question, Puria, because, the word is now very commonly used. If you go to Google, you'll get millions of results for the word co-creation. But as Katharine suggested, 35 years ago, Barbara's used the word and Findhorn used the word. Mm-hmm. So our definition, if you look into nature, if you look into life, you see that there is a natural order, a natural intelligence to life. If you look at a flower, a rose or a daisy or a chrysanthemum, or if you cut open an onion and you look at all those layers of the onion, or you see a picture of a galaxy, you see that there is a natural intelligence. There is a pattern to nature. And we are nature. We are life. So co-creation, as we define it, is conscious co-participation with this natural order, with this intelligence of life, as the impulse of creation itself. So co-creation is both internal and external. I'm in resonance within myself and in resonance with you, and also individually and collectively. And the purpose of it is really for the fulfillment of our hearts and souls. It's to give our gifts to the world and to create a better world for others. But I want to say how this is different from the common use of the word co-creation, which we find used mainly in business, where it's seen as an economic strategy, bringing together a variety of stakeholders for a commonly held result, something that they value as a result. But the basis for it is really economic, as opposed to soulful fulfillment. Mm-hmm. We might say that in business, really, they use the word like cooperation or collaboration.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I would say that certainly core to our purpose is to be able to shift the culture. So as our consciousness is opening, evolving, and we're more aware of the greater energies happening in life, it's like, then how is that embodied in every aspect of life? So we refer to this as whole systems transformation, like how does the practices of giving birth or educating our children, or how we govern ourselves, or how we do economics, all of the various aspects of life are naturally transforming as our consciousness transforms. But it takes a real awareness of what are the key elements that need to be embodied in order for the culture to really represent the consciousness that we're experiencing.
Yeah, and what I deeply sense when I listen to you, and also when I started reading the book, I mean, I just want to show it. This is the Co-Creators Handbook in English, and this is the German version. I really, what I get is that it's two movements. It has an inward movement and it has an outward movement. And I just wonder kind of, and I guess this is the main differentiation also what you mentioned, Carolyn, in economics. I just sense that there is not so much emphasis on this inward movement where you kind of attune with your own wisdom and where you get an understanding and knowledge, but it's deeper than the mind about these patterns and about these codes. And I just wonder if you could maybe share, or I invite both of you, about this, how to create this resonance and this deeper movement also inside.
Yeah, that's an important point you're bringing up here, Puria, in that if we go to the business definition, you know, in business, for an economic strategy, you can be coming from your thinking mind. You can be coming from your ego personality. In co-creation only works if you're coming from your essence, your authentic self. Some people might call it your higher self. You might call it presence. And so co-creation only occurs between presence to presence, life to life, intelligence to intelligence, and in a resonant field. And that means in a heart space, in a space of non-judgment, non-criticism, open-mindedness. You know, I think a great definition of resonance is that it's the invisible space in which co-creation occurs. And that's the thing that might be missing in the business definition, is there's no focus on the resonance, on the development, not necessarily on the development of the individual to be our most expanded self.
And would that also mean then, in a way, I mean, when I take this further, I would say co-creation is more or less a side effect of an inner attitude and a deeper attunement to each other and in this presence and heart space?
Yes.
Yeah, oftentimes we refer to co-creation as a relational path to awakening. So it has so much to do with how we be with one another, how we respect and honor and draw forth each other's magnificence and genius, and how we are willing to work through conflict and take self-responsibility when separation occurs. Mm-hmm. So there's many aspects to it that really feed both a shift in consciousness and creating from a place where we are attuning to the greater field and following our guidance and empowering one another to do that. And I think of the quote by Einstein that's often referred to, is that we can't solve our problems in the same consciousness in which they were created. Mm-hmm. So it's just feels like the imperative of our times to really be able to move into that place where we are accessing a greater field of awareness of brilliance and intelligence, mm-hmm. to deal with all that we need to be addressing in these times.
Yeah, I think it's also important to say here that, what co-creation does is it flattens the hierarchy. It moves us out of the dominator model into a partnership model where we are more empowered and there is more love and there is more creativity. And by the way, that's what happened when Barbara moved that campaign in 1983 from Washington to California. What was happening invisibly there was we were shifting out of the dominator paradigm into the partnership paradigm. Mm-hmm. That was the most essential thing that was happening there. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And when I kind of apply what you said to the workshops you give, I would assume that there is a certain maturity in the participants needed in order to kind of to be open for these practices. What is your experience in that?
Yeah, I what I noticed, the way we attract anything into our lives is through resonance. Mm-hmm. So we notice that the people who come to either our gatherings or our trainings are at a certain frequency of resonance. They are people who are wanting to consciously evolve. They are people who are wanting or are contributing to the greater good, to society. So those are the people who are attracted to this work.
And oftentimes I think have done a lot of inner work and have really taken self-responsibility for their lives and their actions, their thoughts. And I feel the yearning to really be able then to express that and to bring forth one's soul purpose is so strong these days. Mm-hmm. So it's through the small group process, you know, as we come together with others in a field of safety and trust, where we can allow that intimacy, allow our authenticity to be expressed in a safe environment, then that just fortifies or feeds the possibilities of us really being able to bring our brilliance forward.
Mm-hmm. And can you give us a bit an taste of what people can expect when they participate in a workshop with you and your husbands?
Yeah. Well, there are some essential ingredients to co-creation. Just to mention a few, we've already touched into this essential shift in identity from ego to essence, or from person to presence. You know, so that's an essential ingredient. So we have some experiential exercises tapping into the essence of who we are. And then we've already mentioned that the importance of resonance. And so the participants can definitely know that we will be maintaining a resonant field. There will be a field of trust and safety. And it's really just open-heartedness. It's something who we naturally are. When we tap into that essence, that's who we are. We are heartful, loving presence. And then the ability to tap into our inner guidance, to know what is true for us in the moment. And that comes out of our essence also. So those are three of the important ingredients to this whole process.
I would say also that participants that come to our workshops have an experience of hope and possibility for the future. You know, where there's so much negativity and bad news, so to speak, being expressed in the world as things are breaking down, that to feel a pathway to creating a new world, to creating a new possibility. I experience that people walk away with a deeper sense of commitment to that possibility and a picture of what it could be, because it's really experienced in the cells, in the whole being.
Yeah. And what just pops up in my mind out of now this conversation, and also when I started reading your book, is what really kind of struck a chord in me is that we also kind of are invited to really have a clear discernment with whom we co-create, because we need to be really in this resonance. And as you also already mentioned, different skills are also needed when we want to kind of co-create. Yeah. So maybe you could share a bit about that aspect as well.
Yeah, we have found that to co-create, for any co-creative team, there are 4 essential elements to really be operating in this process. So the first is the spiritual component. And by the way, co-creation could be as few as 2 people. Might be 2 people, might be like in the case of the campaign, there were 12 of us. But you have to have the spiritual component, which is the vision, and that's commonly held by everyone in the group. And then you have to have the emotional component, which is the heart space, the resonance. You have to have the mental component, which is the setting up the systems and the structures. And then you have to have the physical component, which is the implementation. And if you don't have one, if you're missing one of these components in either the 2 people or the 12 people, you can still get the job done. And that's what happens often in business, but you're not operating in the co-creative model. And often what is left out is the resonance, if, you know, the caring for the well-being of the people who are participating. And the idea of co-creation is that each one of us in that group is fully giving our gifts. We're not just, it's not that I'm doing you a favor by being part of this group. It's that I am fulfilled in my participation. I'm expanded by my participation.
Mm-hmm. Barbara Hubbard used to speak about sapiential leadership, which she defined as the one who knows leads. And so, like say in the community here of Hummingbird, different people step forward at different times because they have that skill and that knowing, and then they're drawn forth to express it. So it's, each of us has our gift to give, and it's like, how do we really manifest that in a coherent and fulfilling way?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
And I have found in my life that it's finding my perfect team is a process of trial and error.
Mm-hmm.
You don't necessarily attract your perfect teammates the first time around, and that reveals itself. If you find yourself doing a lot of processing, a lot of clearing with somebody or some people on the team, then you know that you're not in an aligned resonance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And what just came to my mind was an experience when I was also living a few years in a community, and we had projects together. And sometimes I guess I wouldn't have the language in this time, but when I'm now listening to you, is this being in this resonance and feeling this expansion and a sense of kind of really everyone was expanded, and we would create together something which was so much bigger than we could expect. And it feels more than kind of being used for something bigger.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's often there's a feeling of playfulness, humor, ease, flow.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it makes you want to be together and to work on your project because it's fun.
We're really blessed in having that experience with Carolyn and her husband Sanford, and Makasha and I. We have our business Living Co-Creation, and we both embody those different aspects that Carolyn spoke of: the structure, the mental, and the heart, and the vision, and also have just a lot of fun and such deep love and care for one another. Mm-hmm. So it makes the actions we do out into the world flow with so much greater ease.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful. And I mean, kind of when we go back also to the workshop, I just wonder, I mean, the workshop is a certain amount of time and people would get experiences out of it and maybe deepen a practice together, and also maybe get triggered or enlivened their encoded knowledge about co-creation, but kind of how to continue from there.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Well, of course, one of the things that happens in the workshop is we create core groups. We put people in small groups, usually about 6 people in a group. But because we also have the handbook, there's an opportunity for people to leave this workshop and be part of their own core group. So there's an ongoing nature to this. We don't just complete on Sunday afternoon, but there's an opportunity to stay connected, to keep using these practices. And also we will offer some Zoom calls after the workshop to answer any questions, to give some guidance, so that we will be available also. Because what we're creating here is a larger community. Everyone who is part of this, you know, we have the same values. We're a family, we're a tribe, so we want to stay together.
And I just wonder, did you see also kind of coming certain projects out of workshops like that, where people kind of found each other?
Yes.
That naturally happens. We also encourage people that are doing a project or a business together to come together as a group, because when you have others that you can really be practicing these with, you know, that have been through the experience of the workshop, then it makes it ever more effective and powerful. And it, you know, as more and more people are embodying these practices, it's like a movement, you know, then it creates momentum as we build toward really birthing a new world together.
Mm-hmm. And if someone would kind of, after watching this interview, being kind of in this, oh, I feel attracted, but I'm not sure, there's so much out there, what would you suggest? How could people really find in themselves if it's for them?
Mm. Great question. One thing that comes to mind for me is to get a copy of the Co-Creators Handbook to see if they feel a resonance with that. Since that is an expression of these practices, a guidebook to doing them. And to follow the heart, to follow the inner knowing and guidance.
Yeah, I notice for me, the way I make decisions, it's self-evident. I can feel it. It's a yes. I can feel it in my body. I can feel it in my heart. You know, it's not something I think about. It's like, yeah, this one's a yes.
Mm-hmm. And I know also in my own life, I've had to work through sometimes the mental objections that can arise. Oh, it's this or it's that, or I don't have time or the money or whatever. And yet if the heart and the soul keep calling, that's always been the best barometer.
Mm-hmm. And I just want to mention that when I'm reading in this book, the word reading isn't really right, because I totally experience that the wisdom which is in it, and when I'm open away and available for that, it really works with me. It's such a deep I don't know, the practice already starts while reading it, and the embodiment and the practice. This is really what I sensed working with this book.
Well, you know, the subtitle is An Experiential Guidebook for expanding your soul's purpose and birthing a new world. So it is, the whole book is designed to be experiential. Mm-hmm. So I'm really happy it's working that way for you.
It's absolutely working like that. And I find it, I mean, I just came across a few weeks ago, but I know that this is a book, this will kind of accompany in my life, because it's really worth going back again and again to certain parts of it and really deepen it.
Mm-hmm. Well, you know, Puria, this is amusing because Catherine and I do that too. You know, we may put it aside and then 9 months later, we'll read through some stuff and we'll say to each other, there's some good stuff in this book.
Also, you know, because it's a process, and just seeing like here at Hummingbird, there's certain elements that one becomes familiar with and are operative in the system. And then there's others that take time to develop, like the decision-making process, to do co-creative decision-making or whole systems decision-making. That's an evolved decision-making process that takes a while to actually incorporate into, or can take a while, into the way that one does their decision-making. So we often refer to it like as beyond consensus, but to attuning to the greater design of creation, to really listening to the field together. And that's a sophisticated way, a very mature way of being able to make decisions. So I think one practices things and then others become like ripe and ready to be brought into action.
Yeah. And when it's kind of really an topic in your life right now, then you kind of can really dive into that subject deeper. Yeah. Wonderful. Is there anything left out where you want to make sure that people which are watching this interview will take away with them?
Well, I'd just like to say that I think the reason co-creation is important at this time is because these are very tumultuous times for many people. You know, there's the existential threat of the climate crisis and nuclear weapons, but in our daily lives, a lot of people feel insecure, maybe financially or in their relationships, and there's a lot of feeling of separation. In this country, we have this tribalism, you know, where people are really feeling separate from one another. So the importance of co-creation is that the process itself is empowering. It calls forth more love. It calls forth more creativity. And that's what we need in our lives. And that's what we as humanity need for society.
Yeah, it feels like the evolutionary imperative of these times to really be embodying this whole understanding and bringing this forth in our lives. It's the calling of our souls, and it feels like it's the calling of the greater soul of Earth, of Gaia.
Yeah,
And
lovely, lovely. Because what I also sense is kind of, there is this inherent knowing and this pull that there is more. We can be in a different way together. We can create something much more amazing kind of, and there is just the sensing more is possible. Let's kind of like a compass, let's direct us there and let's move in this direction.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I think to also overcome this sense of loneliness that's so prevalent, to really come together and feel part of something that's making a difference is such a deep human yearning. So it's all possible as we come together in this way.
Thank you so much for this authentic embodiment of what you are sharing in your work. And thank you for making the effort, also sharing it in Europe in this upcoming workshop. And it was really a delight to speak to you. You feel like sisters to me and friends, even though we haven't met. And I'm really looking forward to co-create something what we feel is possible, something more.
Beautiful. Thank you, Puria.
Thank you so much, Puria.